Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt that eerie chill when someone walks into a room and suddenly they're just gone? No door slamming, no footsteps, no trace. Like reality just folded over them and carried them off somewhere else. Now imagine that, not as a creepy story, but as something that actually happened, right here in the real world. A young man, talking on the phone, asking for help, and then, silence. Nothing but silence. Before we dive into this strange and truly unsettling case, take a second. If stories like this make your skin crawl in the best way, hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss the next mystery we unpack, and drop a comment if you've ever experienced something unexplained in your own life. You'd be surprised how many people out there are still looking for answers. Alright, let's get into it. The disappearance of Brandon Swanson. It was May 14th, 2008. Brandon Swanson, a 19-year-old college student from Marshall, Minnesota, had just wrapped up the spring semester at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. He decided to celebrate with a few friends in the nearby town of Canby. It wasn't a wild party by any means, just a few drinks, some laughs, and goodbyes before everyone scattered for summer break. Around midnight, Brandon said goodbye, hopped in his car, and started the roughly 30-mile drive home. It's the kind of drive you don't think twice about. Straightforward, familiar, just another stretch of blacktop in the Midwest night. But something went wrong. At around 1:15 a.m., Brandon accidentally drove his Chevy Lumina into a ditch near the small town of Lind. His car was stuck, but he wasn't hurt. The kind of minor mishap most of us have had at least once. Frustrating, but fixable. He called his parents, Brian and Annette Swanson, and asked them to come pick him up. He sounded calm, a little annoyed maybe, but totally in control. He told them he thought he was near Lind, and they'd find him easily. So they got in the car and started looking. Here's where things get weird. Brandon stayed on the phone with his parents while they drove around looking for him. You can picture it. Headlights sweeping empty roads, voices bouncing back and forth between cell towers, trying to make sense of a quiet night that was starting to feel just off. For nearly 47 minutes, Brandon and his parents talked. He described landmarks, lights in the distance, the sound of cars he thought were on a nearby highway. He even flashed his headlights in the dark, hoping they could spot each other. But nothing matched up. They couldn't see him, and he couldn't see them. And then, suddenly, Brandon said, "Oh, *T," and the line went dead. No crash, no scream, just those two words, and then, silence. They tried calling him back. No answer. They tried again. Voicemail. The kind of gut punch that makes your heart race even before you know why. By morning, panic had kicked in. Brandon wasn't home, and he wasn't answering his phone. The Swansons called the police, who, like in so many of these stories, initially didn't take it seriously. A college kid out late? Probably just sleeping it off somewhere, they said. But his parents knew better. Brandon wasn't reckless. He wasn't the type to disappear. Eventually, a search was launched. Cell tower records later showed that Brandon had been much further away than he thought. He wasn't near Lind at all, but closer to Taunton, about 25 miles northwest. That meant his sense of direction had been totally off during the call, which made his instructions to his parents useless, through no fault of his own. Even more chilling, his car was found, just as he'd said, off a gravel road, stuck in a ditch. The doors were closed, there was no sign of struggle, and no sign of Brandon. But dogs picked up his scent. It led them on a strange path, first to an abandoned farmhouse, then down to a riverbank along the Yellow Medicine River. The trail just ended, like he'd walked off the edge of the earth. They searched that river again and again. Helicopters, dive teams, volunteers combed the area for weeks. Not a single piece of clothing, not a shoe, not a phone. It's like he was plucked from the planet in mid-stride. So what happened to Brandon Swanson? Some believe he may have fallen into the river and drowned, though no body has ever been found. Not then, not now, over a decade later. And even in water, bodies don't just disappear entirely, especially not in a small river. Others wonder if he ran into someone dangerous. Could he have walked into the wrong place at the wrong time? But again, there's zero evidence. No signs of a struggle. No blood. No dropped belongings. And Brandon didn't sound panicked before the line went dead. Then there's the most unsettling theory, that he somehow vanished due to something we can't explain. Some people have suggested everything from sudden disorientation due to a hidden medical episode, to the bizarre notion that he walked through some sort of thin place. Those old Celtic beliefs that certain locations blur the boundary between this world and the next. Sounds wild, right? But when you've ruled out everything else, the strange starts to look like the only option left. The Swanson family never gave up. They pushed for more attention, more resources, more accountability. They fought for a law, Brandon's Law, which was passed in 2009. It requires law enforcement in Minnesota to immediately begin investigating and filing a missing persons report when an adult is reported missing under suspicious circumstances. No more wait and see. No more assuming they'll turn up. It was a hard-won battle, born from a family's pain. And yet, even with that law in place, Brandon is still gone. His parents still live in the same house, answering the same phone, hoping that one day it might ring with a clue, a tip, something, anything. This story lingers because it hits close to home. Brandon could have been any of us. A brother, a son, a friend who made one wrong turn and never came back. He wasn't running away. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't being reckless. He was trying to get help. He did everything right, and still vanished. And that's what makes this one so haunting. It's not just unsolved. It's unreal in the most disturbing way. Like reality blinked for a second, and in that blink, Brandon slipped through. If this story made your heart skip a beat, or left you with more questions than answers, share it. Talk about it. Comment below if it reminded you of something that never sat right. Maybe a memory, a dream, a feeling you couldn't shake. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe. We've got more stories just like this coming your way. Unsolved, unexplained, and unforgettable. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. A massive Boeing 777 carrying 239 people vanishes mid-flight, leaving behind more questions than answers, and one of aviation's greatest unsolved mysteries. There are things we expect the world to explain. Planes don't just disappear. That's what we've all been raised to believe, right? With radar, satellite tracking, GPS, black boxes, and technology watching our every move, we trust that once you're in the sky, especially in a Boeing 777, one of the safest, most sophisticated aircrafts out there, you'll get where you're going. Maybe with a delay, maybe with turbulence, but you'll land. That's the deal. So when Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 took off from Kuala Lumpur on March 8, 2014, bound for Beijing, nobody thought twice about it. 239 people were on board. Families, couples, business travelers, kids. Ordinary people heading into a regular night. But what happened next turned the whole world on its head. And nearly a decade later, we're still asking the same gut-wrenching question. And hey, if you're as haunted by unanswered questions as I am, take a second to subscribe, drop a like, and let me know in the comments if you remember where you were when you first heard about Flight 370. Stories like this aren't just puzzles. They're scars, left behind by silence. The flight took off at 12:41 a.m. local time. Everything seemed normal. The pilots exchanged routine communications with air traffic control, and the plane cruised smoothly at 35,000 feet. About 40 minutes into the flight, the aircraft was about to leave Malaysian airspace and enter Vietnamese control. That's when it disappeared. Just like that. One moment, air traffic control was tracking it. The next, it was gone from radar. No distress signal. No mayday. No call for help. Just radio silence. Vietnamese controllers assumed something went wrong with Malaysian tracking. Malaysian authorities thought the opposite. So there was a delay, an unthinkable delay of more than 4 hours, before a search and rescue operation even began. 4 hours. That's enough time for an entire transcontinental flight. Enough time to lose everything. What investigators pieced together in the days that followed was, frankly, insane. Military radar data later revealed that, After MH370 dropped off civilian radar, the plane made a sharp left turn. It flew westward across the Malaysian peninsula, then turned northwest toward the Andaman Sea. That's not a technical glitch. That's deliberate. At some point, the plane's transponder was manually turned off. Communication systems were shut down. The plane, it seemed, had been intentionally redirected. But by whom? And why? And here's where it gets worse. Satellites owned by a British company, Inmarsat, continued to pick up handshakes, automatic pings from the plane, for almost 7 more hours after it lost radar contact. Based on those signals, analysts determined the plane likely flew south over the Indian Ocean, to a place with no land, no airports, no one watching. Just ocean. Let's talk theories. And fair warning, none of them feel satisfying. 1. Pilot suicide. Some believe the captain, Zari Ahmed Shah, may have planned and executed a mass murder-suicide. He had a home flight simulator that allegedly showed a similar path into the southern Indian Ocean. Some investigators point to that as damning, but others say it's circumstantial at best. He was an experienced pilot, a family man, and had no known motive. Still, if this was a planned act, it was one of chilling precision. 2. Hijacking. What if the plane was taken over? Maybe by terrorists or rogue operatives who knew exactly how to manipulate radar, transponders, and satellite blind spots? But no group ever claimed responsibility. No ransom, no manifesto, and hijackers typically have demands. MH370 had nothing. 3. Technical failure or fire. Some suggest a slow, creeping fire disabled the crew and communications but left the autopilot running. The plane would have flown until fuel ran out, eventually crashing into the sea. But even this doesn't explain the strange turns. Planes don't just burn and turn across thousands of miles of ocean. 4. Shot down. In the shadow of MH17, another Malaysia Airlines flight that was shot down over Ukraine just months later. Some wonder if MH370 was accidentally downed by a military force and then covered up. It's a dark theory, but one that raises eyebrows. And then there are the truly out there ideas: alien abduction, time warps, black holes. You laugh, but when the most rational options make no sense, people start to look for explanations that do. The search for MH370 became the most expensive in aviation history. Australia led a massive operation in the southern Indian Ocean, covering over 120,000 square kilometers of seafloor using underwater drones and sonar. What did they find? A couple of false alarms, some shipwrecks, and, eventually, some debris. In 2015 and 2016, parts of the plane washed up on the shores of islands near Africa, Réunion, Mozambique, Madagascar. A wing flap, a stabilizer, a few pieces confirmed to be from the plane. That's it. No fuselage, no bodies, no flight recorders. Think about that. A plane the size of a 10-story building crashes into the ocean, and we've got a few battered fragments to show for it. That's like trying to explain the Titanic with nothing but a single broken teacup. For the families of those on board, the uncertainty has been pure torture. No final goodbyes, no remains to bury, no closure. Some of them still hold on to hope that maybe, just maybe, the plane landed somewhere remote, that their loved ones are alive, hidden away, waiting. But time has worn away that hope like waves on stone. The ocean may have swallowed the evidence, but it hasn't drowned the pain. Malaysia Airlines, the governments of Malaysia, China, and Australia, they've all faced intense criticism. Delays, conflicting reports, a lack of transparency, and too many times, families have found out key details from the news, not the people supposed to be helping them. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 isn't just an aviation mystery. It's a hole in the map, a glitch in the narrative we tell ourselves about how the world works. Planes don't vanish, but this one did. And unless the wreckage is found, and the black box is recovered, we may never know what happened in those final hours. We may never understand what the passengers saw, or what the pilots knew, or why the path veered so wildly into oblivion. If this story unsettled you, if it left you with that hollow, unfinished feeling we all get when the story doesn't have an ending. Take a second to share your thoughts. Hit that like button, subscribe for more mysteries we dig into, and comment below with your theory. What do you think happened to Flight 370? Because sometimes, asking the question out loud is the only way we keep the memory alive. And in the case of MH370, silence is not an answer. The Sodder Children Mystery. 5 children disappeared during a Christmas Eve fire in 1945. No remains. No answers. Just suspicious clues and a lifetime of questions. Alright, let's set the scene. It's Christmas Eve, 1945. You've just tucked your kids into bed after decorating the tree. There's food on the table, laughter in the air, and all the small magic of a quiet night spent with family. The war is over. The world is trying to heal. And you, like any parent, are just grateful for the warmth of home and the hope of a new year. Now imagine waking up in the middle of the night to smoke, panic, flames, and before you even know what's happening, your home is engulfed in fire. You scream for your kids. Some get out, but 5 don't. And when the fire is put out hours later, there's no trace of them. Not burned, not buried, not there. This is the kind of mystery that burrows into you. It's not just a case of what happened, but how everything that followed only made the questions worse. If these kinds of stories keep you up at night too, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Maybe you've heard whispers of this one. Maybe it's the first time. Either way, by the end, you'll understand why people are still talking about the Sodder family nearly 80 years later. George and Jenny Sodder lived in Fayetteville, West Virginia, with their 10 children. George was a successful businessman, originally from Italy, who ran a trucking company. They weren't rich, but they were doing all right. Their kids were bright. The house was full. Life, it seemed, was stable. But there were signs, even before the fire, that something wasn't right. George was known for being outspoken about his political opinions, especially when it came to Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy. He didn't hold back. And in a tight-knit community of Italian immigrants, that kind of talk didn't go unnoticed. He'd had arguments. There were threats. Strange men had come to the house offering fire insurance, and when George declined, one man reportedly warned him that his house would go up in smoke and that his children would be destroyed. At the time, it sounded like nonsense. After the fire, it sounded like something else entirely. On the night of December 24th, 1945, the Sodders went to bed in their 2-story home. George and Jenny, their 9 children, one was away in the military, and everything they loved. Around 1 a.m., Jenny woke up to a strange sound, something hitting the roof. Then, smoke. Fire. It spread fast, too fast. George and Jenny managed to escape with 4 of their children. But 5, Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 10, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5, were still inside. Or so they thought. George tried everything. He broke a window, sliced open his arm. He ran to grab his ladder. It was missing. He tried to start his truck to climb onto the roof. The engine wouldn't turn over. The phone didn't work. A neighbor tried calling the fire department but couldn't get through. Another drove to town to sound the alarm. By the time the fire department arrived, 7 hours later, the house was a pile of ash. And here's where it stops being just a tragic house fire and starts turning into a full-blown mystery. In a fire that supposedly burned hot enough to kill 5 children, not a single human bone was found. No skulls, no teeth, nothing. This wasn't speculation. This was confirmed by a crematorium worker the family consulted, who explained that even in extremely hot fires, bones usually survive. And this wasn't a commercial incinerator. It was a wood fire that lasted only a few hours. So where were the remains? Authorities said the fire had simply been too hot. The Sodders didn't buy it. They believed, from day one, that their children didn't die in that fire. They believed they were taken. And honestly, the clues start stacking up in that direction. Let's talk about that ladder. The one George always kept propped against the house. The one he ran to grab during the fire and found missing. Days later, it was discovered in a ditch, nowhere near where it should have been. Then there's the cut phone line. Investigators initially claimed the fire destroyed it, but a technician later confirmed it had been cut, not burned. Someone had tampered with it. And remember that sound Jenny heard? Something hitting the roof? One of her sons would later find a small, hard object in the yard that looked suspiciously like a pineapple bomb, an incendiary device sometimes used in combat. He was just a kid, but even he knew it didn't belong. As if that weren't enough, multiple witnesses came forward saying they saw the missing Sodder children after the fire. One woman claimed she saw them peering out the back window of a car speeding away that night. Another, who worked at a Charleston motel, said she saw the kids with 2 men and 2 women. She remembered them distinctly because the group spoke in Italian and kept the children away from her. Nothing was ever confirmed, but the sightings kept coming. George and Jenny never stopped looking. They put up a billboard along Route 16 with pictures of the 5 missing children and a reward for information. It stayed up for decades, a haunting roadside reminder of the night the world stopped making sense. They hired private investigators. They chased every lead. They even received a letter, decades later, with a photo of a man who looked shockingly like Louis Sodder. On the back was a cryptic note, "Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie. Illil boys." A 90132 or 35. What did it mean? Nobody knows. Was it a cruel prank? A clue? A breadcrumb from someone too afraid to speak? George died in 1969. Jenny in 1989. Neither of them ever got the answers they so desperately needed. The surviving children carried on the search, passing the story from generation to generation, holding out hope that someone, somewhere, would say something. Let's be honest. Nobody knows. Was it a mafia hit? George's political outspokenness made him enemies. Could someone have orchestrated the fire as a cover for an abduction? Was it child trafficking? The era, sadly, was no stranger to stolen children. Or was it just a tragic accident that became tangled in desperate grief and 100 dead-end clues? The official record still lists the children as presumed dead. But the Sodder case lingers in a kind of limbo, a haunting blend of fact and folklore, where too many things don't add up and too many people are still whispering what if? If this story got under your skin, and let's be real, how could it not? Drop a like, hit subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the Sodder children died in that fire? Or do you believe, like their parents did, that they were taken? And if you've ever had a moment where something in your life felt too strange to explain, share it. Sometimes, one story leads to another. And in cases like this, that might be the only way the truth ever comes to light.